You work hard, you show up, you try, but something still feels off, you push. But the results don't match the effort, and deep inside you wonder, is something wrong with me? Am I not enough? But Stoic philosophy teaches that success begins long before results. It begins in the mind, because the mind is not just where thoughts live, it is where your life is shaped, and a weak mind will sabotage even the strongest plant. This is where the path starts, not with action but with mindset. Your thoughts are the soil your life grows from, and if that soil is filled with doubt, comparison, negativity, fear, you can work, you can grind, but the roots will never hold. You must cultivate something deeper, a healthy mindset, a resilient foundation, a mental space where belief is stronger than fear, where clarity overpowers confusion, where growth replaces judgments. Stoic philosophy does not chase success. It builds it from the inside out. So look at what you think when no one is watching. Do you believe that you are capable? Or do you rehearse your limitations over and over? Do you look at failure as proof you should stop, or as feedback that sharpens your edge? Because whatever mindset you repeat becomes who you are. You are not your results. You are your thoughts. You are your response. You are your decisions. You are your direction. And the direction is shaped by how you think. Especially when things don't go your way, your mindset is not passive. It is not background noise. It is the architect of your reality. And most people never question it. They live inside patterns of thinking they never designed. But you must become aware. You must interrupt the loop and ask, is this thought mine, or was it inherited from fear, from trauma, from past failures? This belief, true, or is it familiar? Because what is familiar is not always what is right. And Stoic philosophy teaches us to examine, before we follow, to challenge, before we obey, to observe, before we identify. A man who watches his thoughts is a man who can change them, and when you change your thoughts, you change your life. It begins with awareness, noticing what story you keep telling yourself. I can't, I'm not ready, I always fail, I'm not like them. These are not truths, they are habits, and habits can be broken if they are first seen. So start there. Sit with your thoughts, not to judge, but to understand. See the voice that holds you back and ask, what is it trying to protect me from? Fear will always speak, but you don't have to listen. You get to choose what thoughts you empower, what thoughts you repeat, what thoughts you let stay. And this choice is where your transformation begins. Stoic philosophy is not about positive thinking. It is about accurate thinking, about clearing away illusion and choosing what aligns with reason, with virtue, with growth. You don't need to believe in fantasy. You need to believe in your ability to evolve, to learn, to adapt. And that belief comes not from outside validation, but from inner visions. So today, watch the mind, not with judgment, but with curiosity. And when the old thoughts rise, replace them slowly, deliberately. I can't becomes I am learning. I'm not enough becomes I am growing. This will never work becomes this is part of the process. And over time, those new thoughts become new patterns, and those patterns become power. The quiet kind, the lasting kind, the kind that no one sees but everyone feels when you walk with calm, because you built your mindset on something deeper, something you earned, not in comfort, but in awareness. A man becomes what he permits himself to repeat, not just in action, but in thought, in perspective, in inner language. You are always training your nervous system, your expectations, your beliefs, whether you know it or not. And most people spend their lives training for mediocrity. They rehearse limitation, they repeat fear, they expect the worst, and then they say, see, this is just who I am. But Stoic philosophy rejects that. You are not fixed, you are fluid, you are moldable, you are capable of change, not because life changes, but because you choose to change how you see it. You cannot control the wind, but you can control your sail. And your mindset is the sail you adjust each morning before the world touches you. You must decide how you will meet it, not from emotion, but from clarity. This is why reflection matters. This is why stillness matters. If you do not slow down, you will become a slave to whatever your environment feeds you. News, notifications, opinions, comparison. But Stoic philosophy invites you to step back, to observe, to ask, what am I becoming by thinking this way, by repeating this pattern? Because every thought leaves a fingerprint, and enough fingerprints create a framework, and enough frameworks become identity. But identity is not truth. It is simply repetition, so if you want to change, you must interrupt the old identity. You must become a builder of inner architecture, and that means choosing. Choosing what thoughts to accept, what beliefs to discard, what stories to rewrite. You do not need to believe everything your mind says. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who witnesses them. And that witness has power. The power to separate signal from noise, truth from trauma, value from vanity. Your power is in your pause, your breath, your silence, your ability to see a thought and say, not this one, not anymore. And in that moment you evolve. You move from automatic to intentional, from victim to author, from noise to awareness. This is how mindset is built. Not in a moment of motivation, but in a habit of self-leadership. You do not need to control the world, only your lens. And when your lens is clean, you see clearly, you respond clearly, you live clearly. Stoic philosophy trains you to choose your lens each day, to see setbacks as signals, to see criticism as clarity, to see failure as the forge of strength. You are not here to avoid challenge, you are here to outgrow who you were yesterday. But that growth will never happen if you do not direct it. And direction begins in the mind. The question is not how do I get there? The question is, who must I become to live the life I already know is possible? And becoming is not a leap. It is a series of quiet choices. This thought or that thought. This habit or that habit. This version of me or the next one. And no, you won't always feel ready, but you don't need to. You need only to act, not from feeling, but from alignment. And when you do, again and again, your mindset shifts. From chaos to calm, from doubt to direction, from weakness to rooted inner strength. And that shift is not loud, but it is life-changing. Your mind can be your weapon or your weakness. Your emotion can be your compass or your cage. And most men live imprisoned, not by the world, but by their reactions to it. They are triggered by tone, by failure, by delay, by silence. They lash out, they retreat, they collapse inward. They let the moment own them. But Stoic philosophy offers another way, a way of watching the wave without drowning in it, a way of feeling without being ruled, a way of responding without rushing. Your emotions are real, but they are not final. You feel anger, let it rise, but do not speak from it. You feel fear, acknowledge it, but do not plan from it. You feel shame, observe it, but do not build identity on it. Emotions are messengers, not masters. And the moment you believe that every emotion deserves a reaction, you give away. Your strength, your work is not to suppress, but to refine, to pause, to ask, where did this come from? What is it teaching me? How do I move through this without losing myself? This is the essence of emotional mastery, not coldness, not suppression, but clarity in the heat. And clarity is built in silence, in reflection, in restraint, in daily practices. Stoic philosophy does not teach you to become numb. It teaches you to become wise, to feel deeply but act deliberately, to carry fire without letting it burn the wrong things. Because a man who cannot hold emotion will damage everyone near him and blame them for the burn. But a man who has trained his emotion becomes safe to himself and to others. He becomes the mountain in the storm still, not because the wind is soft, but because his roots are deep, and roots are grown by repetition, by choosing to pause, to reflect, to breathe, especially when it feels like too much. You are allowed to feel, but you are not allowed to use your feelings as justification for chaos. You are allowed to hurt, but you are not allowed to abandon your integrity. You are allowed to cry, but not to collapse. Stoic philosophy holds you to a higher standard, not one of perfection, but of intention. You fall, you rise, you forget, you return. And in returning, you remember, you are not a slave to emotion. You are the one who decides what comes next. This is how you earn peace, not by controlling the world, but by mastering your response to it. And that mastery begins in the small moments, the moments you want to send the angry message and don't, the moments you want to quit and breathe instead, the moments you want to run, but choose to remain. These are the invisible choices that build visible power, and over time your life no longer reacts to every wave. You move from noise to signal, from volatility to presence, and others will feel it. They will feel your calm, not because you speak more, but because you react less, not because you're rigid, but because you are rooted. This is the mark of the inner warrior, not the man who fights the world, but the one who has stopped fighting himself. Clarity is a rare thing. Most men do not know what they value. They know what they want. They know what they fear, but not what they stand for. They chase success without defining meaning. They chase peace without removing chaos. And so they drift from goal to goal, from voice to voice, from opinion to opinion. But Stoic philosophy demands that you choose what matters, what you protect, what you serve. Because if you don't define your values, you will live by someone else's. You will borrow beliefs. You will adopt urgency. You will copy paths that were never yours. And nothing drains the soul faster than living out of alignment. You know the feeling when your actions do not match your truth. When your habits do not reflect your intention. When your life is full but your heart is empty. This is the cost of not being clear, so slow down and ask, what do I believe beneath the noise, beneath the trends, beneath the pressure? What is worth protecting, worth suffering for, worth building? Because without this clarity, your strength will go in 100 directions and accomplish nothing. But with it, you become focused, deliberate, dangerous. Not because you're faster, but because you're aligned. Stoic philosophy teaches that virtue is the root of peace, and without virtue, you will always chase what can never fulfill. So define your code not in public, but in solitude. Write it, live it, adjust it, but do not abandon it. This is the invisible structure that keeps you anchored when life shakes, when pressure builds, when options multiply. This is how you protect your soul. And yes, you will be tested. Your values will not always be popular. They will not always be easy, but they will keep you from collapsing into weakness. The man who abandons his values for comfort will always regret it later. But the man who holds his code even when it costs him builds something rare: self-respect. And that is worth more than any prize. Because when you respect yourself, you walk different, you speak different, you move with calm, not because you're better, but because you're whole. You no longer need to impress, you simply express your values through how you live. And that expression is enough. This is your work to remove the lies that you've accepted, to rebuild a foundation based on truth, not external truth, but inner truth. The kind you feel when you're quiet, the kind that makes you still stoic. Philosophy is not about pretending. It is about returning to what is real: discipline, integrity, courage, patience, focus. These are not fancy, but they are forever. And the more you align your mind with these pillars, the less you need from the world. Because your sense of direction no longer comes from approval, but from alignment. And alignment feels like peace, like coming home to a life that finally matches your soul. So choose again and again to build that life. Not by force, but by focus. You do not need more goals. You need more grounding. You do not need more speed. You need more self-awareness. Because a man who knows his values cannot be moved by trends or threats or temptations. He simply lives by what he has chosen, and that is what makes him free. Once your values are clear, your habits must follow. Because if your daily actions do not reflect your deepest principles, you will feel tension. You will feel confusion. You will feel lost. Not because you lack effort, but because your effort is scattered. Most men don't lack ambition, they lack alignment. They say they want peace, but they keep choosing chaos. They say they want freedom, but they keep choosing distraction. They say they want strength, but they keep choosing comfort. And the mind remembers this disconnect. Every time you act against what you say you believe, you lose trust in yourself. You become divided. Invisible fractures form between who you are and who you pretend to be. But Stoic philosophy is not about pretending. It is about becoming whole, about closing the gap between what you claim and what you consistently do. And that gap can only be closed with habit, daily, repetitive, quiet. The kind of habit that does not ask how you feel, only whether you show up. This is how a man builds trust within himself, not with declarations, but with discipline. Not with emotion, but with structure. You want to think clearly, then build routines that protect your mental space. You want to live with energy, then build habits that restore your strength. You want to move with purpose, then cut what is not essential. You want peace, then simplify. This is how it begins. Not in some future plan, but in your next decision. Will you scroll or will you reflect? Will you complain or will you correct? Will you drift or will you direct? These are the small invisible crossroads you meet every day, and most men don't notice them. They let the day choose for them. They let the feeling decide. But you must choose deliberately. Your calendar must match your character. Your habits must match your vision. Your discipline must match your desire for peace. And no, you won't get it right every time. But every time you do, you strengthen identity. You confirm. I am the kind of man who does the work when no one claps. I am the kind of man who protects his focus like it matters because it does. I am the kind of man who doesn't just read philosophy, but lives it slowly, quietly, consistently. This is the transformation from intention to embodiment, from ideas to integrity, from trying to training, and over time that training becomes natural. What once felt hard becomes who you are, not because life became easier, but because your habits became stronger. This is what separates the man who drifts from the man who directs. He does not live by default, he lives by design, not a perfect design, but a consistent one that reflects his values, his principles, his mission. And when you live this way, your outer life will begin to match your inner clarity. Less noise, less confusion, less regret, and more alignment, depth, power, the kind of power that builds silently through small acts, the kind of strength that does not require attention because it is rooted in truth. Your environment is not neutral, it is shaping you whether you see it or not. What you hear, what you consume, what you tolerate, what you allow. Near your mind is forming the architecture of your thoughts, and your thoughts build your life. Most men guard their money more than they guard their mind. They let anyone speak into them, they let any headline enter, they let any distraction stay. But Stoic philosophy is the art of intentional space, intentional thought, intentional silence, intentional boundaries, because clarity does not survive in noise, and strength does not grow in chaos. So you must begin by clearing your space, your screen, your habits, your inputs. You must decide what is allowed to speak to you, because everything that speaks shapes every voice has weight, and if you don't filter, you will forget what your voice sounds like. And the man who forgets his own voice cannot lead, not others, not himself. So clear the clutter, remove the voices that shout, but do not serve the opinions that provoke. But do not ground the patterns that feel urgent but produce nothing. You do not need more stimulation, you need more solitude. You do not need more content, you need more clarity. And that clarity is only found in quiet. Most people are overstimulated and undercentered. They are full of updates but empty of understanding. They are scrolling but not building, listening but not discerning. But you must be different. Stoic philosophy invites you to create conditions for your best self to grow, and growth needs space not just in your schedule but in your surroundings, your mind, your relationships, because you are not just training your habits, you are training your nervous system. And if your nervous system is always in reaction, always under pressure, always rushing, then peace will never feel familiar. You must slow the pace of your life so your soul can catch up. You must choose stillness as a practice, not as an escape. To sit without reaching, to breathe without scrolling, to listen without reacting. This is not weakness. This is discipline, because the strongest man is not the one who can push through noise, but the one who can build a quiet inner world that no noise can reach. You want to feel calm? Then protect your inputs, guard your mornings, own your evenings, filter your conversations, and above all, honor your attention. Because attention is the currency of your energy. Whatever you give it to grows, so stop feeding what drains you. Start watering what roots your red, what challenges you, not what confirms your fear. Listen to what slows you down, not what speeds you up. Watch what teaches, not what distracts. And in doing so, you create space for thought, for growth, for peace, for power. Because power is not loud, it is focused, and focus requires boundaries. This is how you protect your mind. Not by controlling the world, but by choosing who and what gets access to you. And once you do that, your strength no longer depends on mood or motivation, but on structure. And structure is how freedom is earned. The most powerful transformation does not happen in public. It happens in silence, when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, when no one is checking in. It happens in the quiet spaces between who you were and who you are becoming. And in that silence, most men quit. because silence is uncomfortable, because discipline without praise feels invisible. But Stoic philosophy reminds you that the man you become in solitude is the man you bring into the world. You are not made in crowds. You are made in repetition and reflection and routine. The real work is not in performance but in private practice. The kind that no one sees. The kind that gets boring. The kind that gets lonely. The kind that gets hard. But still you do it. Again and again, you rise early. Not for applause but for alignment. You train your body not for the mirror but for your mind. You keep your promises. Not because anyone's watching but because you are. And the more you keep showing up, especially when no one claps, the more powerful. You become not loud power but quiet, immovable, undeniable. This is the kind of man the world needs but rarely sees, because most men only act when someone else is looking. They only try when there's pressure. They only show discipline when it's rewarded. But you must live differently. You must build in silence so that your strength becomes who you are, not what you perform it. Yes, it will feel lonely, but loneliness is not always a curse. Sometimes it is the forge, where clarity is found, where ego is broken, where character is formed. And character is not something you say, it's something you prove when no one is watching, and you still act with honor. This is what separates the real from the loud, the steady from the scattered, the deep from the desperate. The man who trains alone becomes the man who leads with calm, who walks with weight, because he has already faced the silence, the boredom, the doubt, and kept moving. So don't fear repetition. Don't fear routine. Don't fear quiet. They are your teachers. They are the ground beneath the greatness that others call luck. The world rewards what you do in public. But life changes based on what you do when it's just you. The small habits, the small wins, the private decisions, the kept promises. This is how identity is shaped. Not with noise, but with practice. Stoic philosophy asks you not to perform, but to persist, to live by your code, even when no one else does, to act with clarity, even when no one else understands, to keep walking, even when the path feels empty, because it's not empty, it is yours, and it is the only path that leads to real freedom. Not freedom from responsibility, but freedom within it. The freedom to choose to act, to lead, to carry weight without resentment, to stay grounded when others fall apart. This kind of strength is rare because it is built in the quiet, repetitive, often lonely, but always sacred space called discipline, and you have been called to it. You will be tested not once, but many times, not just by what happens, but by how you choose to see it. Life will not always move in your favor. The path will not always feel smooth. The plan will not always hold. But Stoic philosophy teaches you, do not grow because life gets easier. You grow because you get stronger. And strength is not born in comfort. It is born in resistance, in adversity, in being broken open and deciding to rebuild. Anyway, every challenge is a mirror showing you what still needs to be refined, revealing where your ego still hides, uncovering where your faith is still shallow. And in that reflection, you are offered a gift. Not the removal of the obstacle, but the chance to become more through it. You want clarity, then walk through confusion. You want discipline, then walk through distraction. You want peace, then walk through pressure. Because everything you seek is hiding inside, the very thing you keep avoiding. And the man who avoids will never arrive. But the man who walks through, with eyes open, with breath steady, with heart grounded, he becomes something that cannot be explained. A presence, a power, a peace, not because life gave it to him, but because he earned it in the storm. This is the truth. Most people run from. They want ease without effort. They want progress without pain. They want confidence without confrontation. But Stoic philosophy reminds you that life does not serve growth on a silver platter. It serves it through hard seasons, through closed doors, through silence. And the question is never, why is this happening to me? The question is, what is this waking up in me? What strength, what truth, what direction? Because adversity does not block the path. It reveals it, and most men never reach what's possible because they turn back too early. At the first resistance, at the first rejection, at the first discomfort. But you must walk differently. You must expect resistance and welcome it, not because you enjoy pain, but because you understand pain is part of the path, the right Path is not the one with no struggle, it is the one that refines you as you move through it. And refinement is slow. It is invisible. It is subtle. But over time, it changes everything. Your tone, your eyes, your posture, your presence. Because the man who has endured without complaining, who has struggled without surrender, who has bent without breaking, becomes a man no one can ignore, and that man was built in challenge. So when it arrives, pause, breathe, accept it, not as punishment, but as preparation, not as failure, but as formation. You do not need to enjoy it, but you must not resist it. Lean in, observe, adjust, continue, and trust that what you cannot yet see is being shaped with every step. This is the essence of strength. Not loud, but lasting, not forced, but focused, not hurried, but holy. The kind of strength that comes from walking where most men turn back and coming out not bitter but better. Not broken but built, because you understood from the beginning. This path was never supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be worth it. You will lose, you will fail, you will fall. This is not negativity, this is truth. No man walks through life without being humbled, without being broken, without being brought to his knees. And when it happens, you will face a decision to stay down or to rebuild, and rebuilding is not easy. It is not quick, it is not loud. It is slow, quiet, internal, and that is where your real life begins. Stoic philosophy does not teach you how to avoid failure. It teaches you how to rise after it. Because the measure of a man is not how high he climbs, but how deeply he digs when everything falls apart. And if you've lived long enough, you know the feeling. The silence after the collapse, the stillness after the shock, the ache in your chest when something you built disappears. It could be a business, a relationship, a dream, a version of yourself. And in that emptiness you begin again, not by rushing, not by pretending, but by accepting. This is where I am not, where I thought I'd be, not what I wanted, but real. And in that honesty, you take the first step toward healing. Because you cannot rebuild on denial. You cannot restart on lies. Stoic philosophy demands you face reality as it is not as you wish it was, because only in truth can you find direction. You are allowed to feel the pain, you are allowed to grieve, but you are not allowed to quit. The man who chooses to rebuild after everything falls is the man who becomes unshakable, because now he knows what it's like to lose and still walk. He knows that strength is not avoiding collapse, it is rising after it. So rise slowly, intentionally, deliberately. Build again. Not the same thing, not the same way, but from deeper ground, from lessons learned from pain, understood from wisdom, earned. Because failure is not and it is a sharpening, and every sharp edge you now carry is a tool to build better, to lead, better, to live with more weight. You do not need to erase the past. You need to learn from it, carry the scar not with shame but with certainty. That you've lived, that you've lost, that you've come back stronger. This is the power of perspective. You are not starting from nothing. You are starting from experience. And experience, when paired with reflection, becomes clarity. So ask yourself, what did I gain from what I lost? What did I see when I had to sit in silence? What did I find when I had to let go? You may discover that what you truly needed was not what you thought. And this is the great paradox of loss, that sometimes it strips away everything false and leaves you with only what is real. Your breath, your values, your focus. And from that you begin. Stoic philosophy reminds you that fortune is never stable, but virtue is. And when everything else breaks, virtue remains. Your calm, your integrity, your willingness to continue, not because it's easy, but because it is right. Because the man you are is not defined by what you keep, but by what you choose after everything is gone. And if you rebuild with intention, with wisdom, with self-respect, then what you build next will not just be stronger, it will be sacred. Success is just as dangerous as failure, because while failure humbles, success tempts. It tempts you to relax, to forget, to slow down, to believe that the path is finished when it has only just begun. Stoic philosophy teaches that the wise man does not rise or fall with results. He stands in the same calm, whether praised or rejected. He knows that the applause is not the point, and the outcome does not define the man. What defines the man is how he carries himself through both. Can you stay grounded? When everyone claps, can you stay steady when everything works? Can you keep your habits when the rewards are flowing? Or will you forget that the discipline, not the achievement, is what made you? This is the hidden test of life, not just how you lose, but how you win, because many rise but few stay true. Success without structure creates ego, creates blindness, creates entitlement. And slowly, without even noticing, you lose the edge. You lose the reason, you lose yourself. But the man who lives by Stoic philosophy measures success differently. He does not measure it by numbers or titles or applause. He measures it by consistency, by integrity, by alignment. He asks, am I still showing up the same way when no one's looking? Am I still grounded when the world says, I'm great? Am I still doing the work because I believe in it, not because others are watching? This is the discipline after victory, and it is just as sacred as the discipline after defeat. Because either way, the path continues. You are never finished. You are only refined, and refinement requires detachment. Detachment from outcome. Detachment from identity that is tied to performance. You are not your wins. You are not your losses. You are your patterns, your choices, your presence, and that presence must remain calm through both extremes, because the moment you chase highs, you will fear lows. But when you learn to hold both with grace, with distance, with discipline, you become untouchable, not by avoiding pain, not by avoiding praise, but by not needing either. This is the centered life, not swayed by how the world sees you, because you already know who you are. And when you live from that knowing, you move differently. You speak less. You listen more. You no longer prove, you practice. You no longer chase. You choose, you no longer cling, you continue. And that continuation without dependence on outcome is what builds peace. True peace is not found at the top, it is found in being the same man. In every room, humble in loss, humble in victory, disciplined in drought, disciplined in harvest. You do not let failure destroy you, and you do not let success distract you. You simply walk with quiet fire, with silent strength. Because the fire was never meant to be shown. It was meant to burn within, to illuminate your path, not blind others. So hold this fire with care and keep walking. Not faster, not louder, but truer. Because that is the real reward, to become someone who remains through all of it. You will be misunderstood. You will be judged. You will be criticized, especially when you begin to walk differently. Especially when you stop explaining. When you start growing. When you choose silence over approval. And in those moments, you will feel the pull to defend yourself, to explain your worth, to prove your heart. But Stoic philosophy offers you something higher. You do not need to be understood by everyone to live in truth. You do not need to correct every false assumption to walk in integrity. And you do not need constant agreement to know who you are. Your path is not a debate. Your values are not a negotiation. You were not born to convince the world of your soul. You were born to live it. And that life requires courage. The quiet kind. The kind that stands when others point, when others twist your words, when others turn away. You remain it in anger, not in ego, but in stillness, because you know your character is louder than any accusation, and your peace is more valuable than any approval. This is the freedom few will ever know. The freedom to walk unclapped, uncheered, but unshaken. To keep going even when your silence is mistaken for weakness. Even when your discipline is mistaken for arrogance. Even when your solitude is mistaken for rejection, because you are not here to be liked. You are here to be real. And being real means you will not always fit. You will not always be celebrated. You will not always be safe in other people's expectations, but you will always be at peace in your own presence, and that is a sacred place to live. So let them misunderstand, let them talk, let them doubt. You do not owe the world your explanation. You owe yourself your obedience to what you know is right, and when you stay faithful to your code, to your mission, to your rhythm, your results, your peace, your growth will speak, not with noise but with weight, and the people who are meant to walk with you will feel it. You don't need to explain. Authenticity is not loud, it's lived, and you are already becoming the kind of man who does not flinch when he is questioned, who does not collapse when he is rejected, who does not chase when he is abandoned. He simply continues, because the journey was never about validation. It was about evolution, and evolution requires solitude. Don't resist it, sit with yourself and see who remains, not when praised but when misunderstood. And if you can remain still rooted honest, then no criticism, no exclusion, no public doubt can remove what you've already confirmed in private. This is what Stoic philosophy builds in you: strength that does not argue but endures, a presence that does not chase but radiates, a soul that does not fold but holds. And the longer you walk this path, the less you need to explain, because your life becomes your voice. You've walked through silence, through pressure, through misunderstanding, through trial, through discipline. And now you begin to see what this path was always about. Not becoming more, but becoming real. Not adding layers, but removing what was false. You are not here to perform your way to peace. You are here to practice it, to embody it, to protect it. And the man who walks this path does not shine because of noise. He shines because of clarity, because he has let go of everything that clouds the mind, that steals his attention, that weakens his word. He no longer chases pleasure. He builds presence. He no longer seeks to win every argument. He lives a truth so deeply felt it needs no defense. This is what Stoic philosophy gives you: a return to what matters, to simplicity, to quiet, to strength that comes from staying centered when the world spins. And the journey does not end here. There will still be days when your discipline is tested, when your ego rises, when your path feels uncertain. But now, you are not shaken, because you are not waiting for life to feel perfect. You are walking with your principles intact, your direction clear, your focus strong. You have become what most never will: a man who can lead himself, a man who can sit in silence, without collapsing in power, without corruption and pain, without complaint. You do not ask, what will this give me? You ask, who will I become by choosing this? And that is why you are free. You are no longer chasing, you are becoming. You are no longer proving, you are practicing. This is what builds legacy, not what you leave behind, but what you carry now, the energy you walk with. The way your presence shifts the room. And no one needs to know your name for your life to speak loudly, because a man who has mastered himself becomes a message, a reminder that it's possible to stay steady, to live deliberately, to rise without arrogance, to endure without complaint, to speak without noise. And this message will echo in everything you do: how you work, how you rest, how you love, how you lead. So continue with calm, with clarity, with conviction, because you are not done. You are never done. But now you are ready to keep building, not just results, but rhythm, not just goals, but grounding, not just habits, but heart. This is the journey. This is the life, a life of quiet power, of conscious strength, of deep-rooted presence. A life that does not shout but speaks through action. This is the way, and you are already walking it.